Hello and welcome everyone back to the Publisher Lab. I am Tyler Bishop and joined alongside me today is Whitney Wright. Whitney, welcome back to the Publisher Lab.
Yeah, this is exciting to kind of have it back up and running again. Kind of feels like the old days a bit, although we have a nice new kind of studio space.
I know.
Nice.
Check us out. Moving on up.
Yeah.
I think, it reminds me of I see on Netflix now they're doing that 90s show, which is like a modern, reboot of that 70s show. And there's a lot of those. And I kind of feel like maybe that's what this is. It's a reboot sort of.
Now's the time. Everybody's doing it. Hop on that trend.
Yeah, and classically, we'll be behind and we'll be the ones that find out last that maybe it was a terrible idea. But there's very few things that I've done over the last 5 or 6 years, especially in this industry, that I've gotten more people just across different verticals and just areas where it's like I'll go to events, I'll get emails from people, I'll run into customers that we work with. And people will just say, hey, whatever happened to the podcast? I used to love listening to the Publisher Lab. And, maybe you could give our audience a little background on kind of why we stopped. But, I would say it was definitely something that we probably shouldn't have.
Yeah, I think as far as kind of why we stopped, bandwidth was definitely an issue. We didn't have nearly as many people on the marketing team. And preparing for the podcast can take a while. And recording, depending on what happens. We were just talking about how it's horrible to record a podcast and then you realize the sound wasn't on.
No one else has ever done that, right?
No, yeah. I think time was a big thing, and we weren't sure just how effective it was. But yeah, I feel like we've heard a lot of people that have kind of wondered what happened to the podcast. So we're gonna try it again, round 2.
Well, one of the afflictions that I seem to have suffered from throughout my life is to be the first one on a trend or the first one to do something that really takes off and then abandon it slightly too quickly. Way back in the day, I had one of the very first jiu-jitsu news and information websites, and it was really successful. But I said to myself, how big can a jiu-jitsu website really get? And I kind of just let it fall off a little bit. And I said the same thing about the Publisher Lab, where it's how many publishers are going to actually want to listen to a podcast? Well, it turns out a lot. I think looking ahead now, it's right after us. I saw a lot of really good podcasts emerge. And if you think about it, a lot of our listeners are independent publishers. They are, website owners or, work for a small media conglomerate. I don't know if small conglomerate sounds like an oxymoron a little bit, but small media companies. And, a lot of times you work, and toil away in silence or all by yourself. And so I think, listening to a podcast on, your subjects of interest, I think makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, maybe we missed the boat there, but hopefully, not too late.
Yeah, podcasts are hot right now. Everybody's listening to podcasts, so I think we're just in time. But you want to jump into what we have to talk about today?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. First topic is social SEO and TikTok. So for years, Google has held over 90% of the search engine market share, which is not surprising. But more and more people are turning to social media, specifically TikTok, for search queries, more so than just for entertainment. And there's a statistic, this is an article by The Drum, 40% of 18 to 24-year-olds now turn to TikTok rather than Google for searches.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you do this?
I don't do it as much, but I'm also not in that age bracket. So,
Me neither, if you can't tell.
This is Gen Z, looking up topics, but it kind of makes sense because if you think about it, mouth to mouth used to be word of mouth, not mouth to mouth.
Mouth to mouth.
That's CPR. Word of mouth used to be really popular with digital ads, and that was one of the most popular ways to spread information and how advertisers really, I guess, push their products. And it's exactly the same thing. TikTok is word of mouth, and it says 79% of users say user-generated content impacts their purchase decision, and TikTok is word of mouth. So 92% of consumers trust word of mouth above other forms of advertising. So
that's interesting.
It's kind of an interesting topic. And so, what's the future of social SEO? Closed captions, alt text captions, understanding keyword research on the TikTok.
This is something that I think is it's an area where I think a lot of publishers who have been traditionally thinking about SEO in terms of search engines and stuff like that. You know, like back in the day, like Facebook and even something like Instagram, they were very rigid, and I think publishers have been burned before on like, you know, how do I optimize for this thing? They're just going to send, you know, cap my reach or something like that. But now you have these platforms where, I think I've mentioned this a long time ago on a previous podcast, but I think there was some time, I think it was around 2017, the number one place that people went to for advice on raising a child prior to 2017 was their parents, and then after 2017 it was influencers. And you know, you think about all the things that you would search, you know, to basically get information on how to raise a child, and you know, then you've got TikTok where your influencers are anyways. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it does kind of make sense, and people are more visual. People want like younger generations want a more visual representation of what they're searching for. So it's like short form, quick video content, which is like really popular right now. Video content, short form. So it's kind of this perfect storm of like a place to search for things and stuff. So what do you think, like, this is like the future of search, or how do you think that this is going to affect search in the future? So
it's a good question, because so with so many things in publishing, I'm both an end user and like a subject matter expert, having been in this field for so long. But this is an area where it's like, it's really hard for me to make predictions because I'm not a TikTok user. Like I don't like type things into TikTok to find things, but I know my wife does. I know we were hanging this giant picture on our walls, and the frame for this thing had gotten warped a little bit, so like one of the corners stuck out. And what she'd done, she'd actually found on TikTok, and you basically just take a screw, you put it into the wall, and then you put like one of those like screws that has like the little circle at the end of it. I don't know. Yeah. If you can't tell, you don't want me to hang up anything in your house. And you basically just like latch like the two together. So one from the back of the frame to the end of the wall. And I was like, oh, that's really clever. Where'd you get that? And she was like, oh, I found it on TikTok. And you know, if you're a video publisher, it's very hard to ignore something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think YouTube is still kind of like that as well. People search how-tos on YouTube as well, but like people really are turning to TikTok. I didn't think that TikTok was really going to take off the way that it did. Yeah. I remember seeing it at a ad conference. They had like a booth and stuff, and I was just like, oh, what's TikTok? Like another social media thing. And I love TikTok now. So
yeah, you can definitely lose a lot of time on it. And I think, you know, we've watched the progression of video publishing go from like you have scheduled viewing with television to like on demand, where it's like you can record things on a DVR, you can have like, you know, stuff that you download and watch. Same thing with streaming. And then you've got like something like YouTube, where it's like you can literally just go find, you know, elements of whatever it is that you want to find on demand. And then now you have TikTok, where it's like you open the app and it's like, here's stuff right away. Mm-hmm. Go, autoplay with the sound on. And yeah, like I said, you could lose a half hour just like that.
Yeah, exactly. So I think kind of what I'm thinking is that, like, you can't, I mean, this is a larger topic in digital publishing anyway, but just you can't ignore video, basically. And whether that's TikTok or YouTube or whatever video platform you want to use, it's just the time of video is now, and it's really important to kind of hop on that.
I think, you know, a lot of people, so something I caution publishers on quite a bit is, you know, there's a thinking to where, especially if you're primarily, you know, a website that publishes articles or blog posts or something like that, you'd think like, well, videos, it's happened. Like the moment for that is past. And it's like anything else. It's like, I think the iPhone was released in 2009, but the average American didn't have a smartphone of any class.
2006 or 7.
And it was 2009 for the iPhone.
Oh, okay, the iPhone.
And then the smartphone didn't become the majority of people had a smartphone, as opposed to a stupid phone. I don't know, a non-smartphone. Yeah. A jitterbug, I guess. Until I think it was 2017 or 2018.
I didn't have one until 2013, I think.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah. I think I was 2012, maybe 2013. So I was probably in the same.
And I had like an old generation. Like I got like 2 generations behind whatever was out at the time, because I was cheap. But
well, you know, I remember whenever it came out and people would stand in line for it, I was just like, all right, cool. It's an iPod phone. Yeah. You know, like the early adopters can get that. I don't know if this is gonna catch on, and so ignore all my advice about trends. You know, but the biggest thing is just that video, it's easy to think like, oh, I missed the boat here, but in reality, it's like this is probably what people will call the start of the golden age of video.
Yeah.
And the barriers keep getting lower. So like this is where I would say like look at the opportunity, because we've been stuck with this idea that you have to be in Google search or YouTube to be relevant in video. There's actually 3 search engines for video, all owned by Google Images and Video, and YouTube. But now it's like with something like TikTok, I think TikTok actually had more active users this year than Google did, or looking back to 2022. So an audience potentially larger than the one that you would get through Google search is available, and yeah, it's just handing out traffic.
Yeah, exactly. You can always redirect that traffic to your website. So the next topic we kind of have is Microsoft and OpenAI extend a deal to make AI accessible to everyone. And this is an article by Search Engine Journal. It's a multi-billion-dollar partnership to accelerate the development of AI technology. And this partnership already is in place, and they created the GPT-3, which is one of the most advanced natural language processing models. And so they plan to democratize AI and make it accessible. So they're going to be supercomputing at scale, really using specialized computers to speed up OpenAI's research, creating new AI experiences, using OpenAI's models in its consumer and enterprise products, and creating new digital experiences. And exclusivity. Microsoft Azure will power all OpenAI workloads as the company's only cloud provider. Manny, can you scroll down?
It's a bold move by Microsoft, and also a very aggressive and, to be honest, a really smart move on their part.
Yeah.
I mean, I think everybody thinks of Bing as this like second-class search engine, and it is in terms of traffic. I think I don't even think that Bing is ahead of those like DuckDuckGo and maybe even Brave's own browser and stuff like that now. But I wouldn't think of this in terms of search engines the way that we do today. Anybody that's used ChatGPT, I'm sure most of our listeners probably have at least seen it. Powered by GPT-3, which soon will be GPT-4, which, like, I don't know, based on my experiences with products that number upwards, should be better.
Right.
You can start to begin to see a future in which Google and even the open web, to that extent, maybe are in trouble. And what I mean by that is, and I've said this before, and you can take it with a grain of salt for that reason, because it's a prediction, but I don't imagine that the way that people will get the majority of their information in the future will be by loading a list of websites with potential answers on it from an interface. It just doesn't make sense. It seems inefficient compared to the way that things operate in, like other realms of technology.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Microsoft confirms that Bing search engine is set to be enhanced with chatbot function shortly, and maybe in March. And Google has gotten the go-ahead to integrate chatbot technology into Google. So it's really a competition to see who can do it first. Everybody's wanting the next big thing, and this is maybe it.
And for those that may be going, well, Microsoft, they've got the jump here because they're using what is considered by most to be the world's leading natural language sort of like AI model. I would say not so fast. Google has Lambda, and you may remember Lambda because there was a story last year about one of the scientists there that was working with it. They claimed it was sentient, which sounds scary until you realize the guy seems like maybe he's not all together on this. He had an eclectic background, to say the least, and Google was like, no, we don't think that.
I can remember that.
But the thing is like Lambda is at least as good, if not better, than GPT-3, and Google has kept it close to their vest for a long time. For all the reasons that we're seeing is when ChatGPT launched recently, you're seeing an exponential flywheel effect of all the ways this is being used. I get advertisements every day for people that are building software that's essentially just a wrapper over the top of ChatGPT. Google has said, we're gonna try to deprioritize AI written content, but cat's out of the bag. It's really obvious that ChatGPT can write content as good, if not better, than humans in some cases. And that doesn't mean that it can create original content it can write better. And I think that there's a lot of distinctions that come with that. But the way that I would think about it in this term is basically that Google is at a severe disadvantage in this realm for one reason alone, and that is legality. So right now, if you search, how to re-picket a fence. I don't know if that's something that you do. The pickets come with it. I don't know. Again, don't let me do work on your home. But if you're trying to search that, you're probably going to get from Google a video. You may get a knowledge graph of some of the instructions or bullets. You might even give it an image. But you're going to have to go someplace else to a website to get the rest of that information, because Google can't just scrape the content and steal it without permission. And so as much as they might want to, Google cannot just give you your answer, even though they might be able to. And there's court rulings on this. I think in Australia, they've said to Facebook and Google that if you publish in your news feed or in results news provider information, that you have to pay them. And that's a precedent that's been set. And so that's a really long, steep hill to climb if you start just stealing people's content off their websites and serving it as, a result. Meanwhile, you have anyone that wants to come along and rebuild or build something new that maybe doesn't have those same parameters because they haven't crawled the entire internet and indexed it yet. They could, do deals with publishers, or they could, index their own, version of the web and summarize the information, create metadata out of it, and then serve that as a result. So Google's almost constrained from participating in what I think will be the future of search in some ways.
Yeah, that was a mouthful, but I agree with all of it. Speaking of Google, the big story, I saved it for last. The U.S. Justice Department sued Google on Tuesday for abusing its dominance of digital advertising.
They would never. Google would never.
This is a Reuters article and the LA Times. I grabbed information from both of them, and so they should be forced to sell its ad manager suite. There have been complaints by advertisers and publishers alike that Google is not transparent enough about where their ad dollars go, specifically about where how much publishers get and how much goes to Google. So Alphabet, Google's parent company, just to kind of put this into perspective, is estimated to bring in $73.8 billion through its ad operations in this year. And most of it, $58.8 billion, comes from Google's search advertising business. The rest is from display ads. And Google alone is expected to generate $65.7 billion in digital ad revenue just in the US in this year, which is about 26.5% of the market. So they have a huge stronghold on this, and this is kind of, I feel like, been coming for a long time, but you have Antitrust that says that Google has used anti-competitive and unlawful means to eliminate or diminish any threat to its dominance.
Oh, who me?
Yeah.
That's what Google's thinking.
Exactly.
Me? Oh, it's just purely a misunderstanding.
Right. Well, and then Google's like, you're slowing innovation and going to raise advertising fees, which is going to be hard for small businesses and publishers. And so the government is really kind of going after all big tech, Amazon, Meta, Apple, and 8 states have joined in the Tuesday lawsuit, including our home state, California. So this is kind of not surprising, but it is kind of a big story. We'll see how far it goes.
So I've said for a long time, because you could look at a lot of different sections of Google's business, honestly, every big tech company, and say, this is the area where antitrust is really relevant. So antitrust, by definition, is basically using a dominance in one market or vertical and using that to create one in another. So people think of Google search as being the only search engine for a lot of different reasons, but they haven't necessarily used that search engine to create a monopoly on search somehow, right? Like anybody can index the web. There's Bing. It's the most popular one, but the biggest thing is that with Google and their ad business, there is one example that is sort of their undoing here, and that is, and this is one that our listeners may or may not be familiar with, but the idea that you cannot serve ads from Google's ad exchange, which includes more than just Google advertisers. So the way this works is advertisers put money into Google, and then basically those ads are served through one or two advertiser products. They're collected in one or two products. Google AdWords, which is just Google, or Google 360. Ad Manager or Google Marketing 360, whatever they call it now, and that allows any basically ad network or SS or what they call a DSP, demand side platform, to basically put inventory in, meaning ads. And then you have Google Ad Manager, and Google Ad Manager basically allows you to basically serve ads as an advertiser across all kinds of different mediums: television, YouTube, video, websites, all that kind of stuff. And you can serve those ads directly through Google Ad Manager. If you're a publisher, you can display ads through using the same tool, Google Ad Manager. But if you put AdSense on your site, you're just getting the ads that are from Google. So, somebody puts display ads into AdWords, they come out in AdSense. If you are Rubicon or Sovereign or any number of the thousands of ad networks that are out there, you can't get on enough websites on your own. And so Google has what they call the ad exchange, which means they say they have a fair playing field, which means if everybody wants to just bid against each other, we'll, serve out the highest bid. So that way Sovereign and everybody else can get on more websites because everybody is using Google Ad Manager as an ad server to put ads on their websites, or Google Ad Manager child account. It's called Google MCM. And what this does is it means that everybody is forced to compete in Google's gym. And the winner that comes out for each ad spot served from Google Ad Manager is served from Google's tool, and you have to assume that Google is creating a fair playing field. And for a long time, they really didn't. And then you had these innovations like header bidding, where it's like a separate auction just to keep them accountable. But the problem with this is that Google's ad exchange, which conglomerates ad demand from across the industry into one playing field, the only way that you can get access to it is through Google Ad Manager. So if this is getting dense, my apologies. So think of it this way. You have the NFL, let's say, and all the teams play in the NFL. But imagine if the NFL was like, hey, all you teams that are all competing against each other, the NFL is now owned by the Cowboys, and we're going to play all games at Cowboy Stadium. And the only way to play these games is at Cowboy Stadium. And whenever all the games are played, we'll divvy up the money, and then we'll pay you out however much money your fans gave us to watch the games. All the other teams would be like, no way. Like, we don't, number one, how do we know that we can trust you? And number two, like, why do we have to all play all the games in your stadium? Mm-hmm. Why can't we play some in ours? And they're just like, well, we don't trust yours, and we have the biggest fan base, so we're going to play them all at our place. That's how Google Ad Manager works today, is that Google's Ad Exchange, which is supposed to be open for everyone, requires that you use Google's own tool to then serve those ads. It didn't used to be that way. You used to be able to connect it to, your own ad server. You could build one if you wanted to. And so this is where Google has used a monopoly, where because they have this relationship with advertisers and this relationship with publishers, that it's so massive that they use that to force everybody to use their sort of like connecting tool between the two. And this is the definition of antitrust. I mean, I have a hard time seeing an argument otherwise.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how this goes because, like you said, this is the definition of antitrust, and I just am curious to know how they're going to defend themselves and try to keep this up.
And also the stats that they often quote are somewhat inaccurate, because I think Google's ad revenue is $73.8 billion. Total advertiser spend on digital is $170 billion. Mm-hmm. So Google is always like, we're only like 25% of the market, and you're like, that doesn't add up. Like that, those aren't the percentages that I'm seeing. And then on top of that, you've seen Google make decisions over time that definitely seem protective of this. Mm-hmm. They say, we're going to make the chain of intermediaries thinner so that there's more transparency. It also favors them because it makes them the arbiter. Mm-hmm. So if you're like, I want more transparency, and Google's like, say no more, it's like, well, they're opaque to begin with.
Right.
It's like, shouldn't transparency mean that everybody can kind of see? And that's sort of what this alleges, is that the fees and how much people take within this chain are opaque to begin with. And then you have Google that is basically saying like, I'm going to collect all the money and I'll let you know. And yeah, there's nothing that governs them to do that like accurately or ethically. And so yeah, we'll see what happens. Amazon is definitely a growing player in this space if you look at them throughout the years. Same thing with Apple, who stepped in here. Apple's made a lot of bold moves to cut Facebook out with their third-party cookie blocking and stuff like that. And so Apple's realized like everybody's trying to get closer and closer to the user. Amazon invested a lot in Wi-Fi technologies over the years because they've realized that you can get cut out unless you're on the device. If I'm on my device, everything is encrypted when it goes out back into the internet. And so Apple knows that they've got like boxed out. They're like, we can control everything from here. But across a Wi-Fi network, you can actually bypass some of that or collect similar data. So Amazon's actually gotten in there too. It's Facebook that's left out in the cold here.
Yeah, poor Facebook. Not really.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to fetch a lot of sympathy from our audience.
Just quickly, what do you think this would do to the digital advertising? I guess like how it operates and.
So with just about everything in the technology space, I think we're always led to believe that the boogeyman is that things will get worse because you'll have just a lot more like incongruency and a lot more sort of Wild Westism, if that's a thing. Like I do it a lot. Yeah. A lot of Wild Westism with me. But I actually think it makes it better because I think the correct action, and you saw this with Microsoft when they were forced to sort of break out Internet Explorer as a part of their operating system almost 20 years ago, maybe more than 20 years ago, that it created a more competitive browser sphere where it's like you have, after that, multiple different browsers came in vogue and were popular. Now it's Chrome, Safari on mobile. And so what I think will happen is if they're forced to break Ad Manager and AdX out, meaning to access AdX, you could use your own ad server or any number of ad servers that somebody would build, and anybody can connect into AdX without needing to have Google as an intermediary there. People might decide that they're going to pick up their ball and go someplace else and start a different ad exchange that's more open source. But I think everything about this makes the world more competitive for advertisers and more transparent. So I think that that's a good thing. And what we see is that competition drives up ad rates. So it's good for publishers. It just may mean that there's more to navigate, and the discrepancies between somebody that knows how to navigate this and somebody that doesn't may grow a little bit larger.
All right. Well, there you have it. Publisher Lab is back.
Nice, dense, and also like very. It was a great list of topics because we're right. I think we're in the heat of an era of publishing where everything's about to change a lot, and I think if you're somebody that's paying attention to these things as they happen, you're gonna be poised to really just thrive. And if you kind of close your ears and just say these are all just trends that are, just another trend and they're going to go by the wayside. I'm going to ignore AI. I'm going to ignore what the U.S. Justice Department is doing with Google. I think there's a really good chance that you're not going to be relevant in a few years. And whether that's true or not, I think that those that are paying attention and at least have their ear to the ground on it are going to be set up for success either way.
I agree. Well, that's it for the Publisher Lab. We'll be back potentially next week, I think.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
Yeah, it's hard to have a podcast that's not consistently available. So, yeah, we've kind of delayed restarting it because we wanted to make sure that we had the schedule set up so that we could produce continuous episodes, and I think we're there. So, make sure that you like or subscribe to the podcast wherever you are listening to this, which should be available everywhere. Is this going to be available? It is going to be available on our YouTube channel as well, correct? Yep. So it'll be available on YouTube and Humix, and you'll be able to watch this podcast if you're listening now and you want to see what we're talking about as we talk about it. Doesn't get more real than that. And hopefully you'll subscribe and keep your phone or device handy so that you can check us out each week. And yeah, is there any place that they can leave feedback or anything else like that, Whitney?
Not off the top of my head, but that would be.
We don't want it. If you have opinions, keep them to yourself.
YouTube comments, great place, and maybe we'll get something more formal set up in the meantime.
Yeah, YouTube comments, boy.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of the Publisher Lab.
Thanks, everybody.